Welcome to the Lubbock or Leave It podcast, a recruiting specific podcast on RedRaidersports.com. He's Ben Golan. I'm Matt Clare. As always, we're brought to you guys by Carnley Properties. If you're in the Austin metro area and you need real estate help, you got to contact Clayton and his team at Carnley Properties. Not only are they big Red Raiders, but they're also longtime Red Raider Sports members. And, whether it's something in the city, the burbs, ranch land, they cover it all. So when you're making a decision like that, you need somebody who knows what they're doing. And we highly recommend Clayton Carnley and his team at Carnley Properties. We'll put all their info here below the player. With that being said, Ben, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well after that basketball game last night. It feels like every day football is getting a new commit. So, just a lot of good news, a lot of good happenings lately. Plus,
there you go.
plus my work got canceled yesterday. Not ideal, with the ice coming, but I get to have a day off. So I will enjoy that too.
Hey, there you go, man. The rest of us will still work. So you just enjoy that time. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, I don't know about you, but we've got a lot to get to. We've interviewed so many recruits and typed some of these stories. You guys, first off, again, this is a Red Raider Sports podcast. Get over there. My fingers were tired on Sunday, Ben, just doing so many interviews and typing so many notes.
Yeah.
But it was all worth it. I mean, the coaches had a gigantic junior day, 65, 70 plus prospects, in town. And that's what we talked about before we started recording. But, you hit on it. I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't kind of go over all the commitments, because now we have 5 commitments in like the last week or so, right? So it's been a wild ride. As of tonight, this is Wednesday, February 2nd. Texas Tech just landed a commitment this afternoon. And then, like I said, 5 over the past week and a half, 2 weeks. So let's dig into those guys, Ben. I guess, just like we did last time, the people commented that they liked it. We do need to round some of this out with the basketball stuff, because I know you got to go to the game in Lubbock against Mississippi State. And, of course, everyone was watching last night. So absolutely noteworthy there. But, Ben, 5 commitments. Let's start with today and maybe work backwards, so it'll be relevant for people watching it. So Caleb Smith, Frisco Reedy, this is obviously a kid that got on our radar last November, but I think if you and I are being honest, they were offering so many kids that that radar wasn't precise. He's not a kid I was checking in with all the time. However, I got a chance to talk with him today. He did visit for the game, in Lubbock last year. He was there with mom and his younger brother, who is actually a 2024 listed as a linebacker. Looks like he plays running back and defense for Reedy. But another, pretty big kid, also a power lifter. I mean, just definitely jumps out as an off the bus guy, right? Just kind of interesting how all this together, I think, came together. I think it's 2 things. One thing that's very consistent, even when I talk about the recruiting interviews and a lot of these commitment interviews, it really starts with a relationship with James Blanchard. Then it quickly forms into a conversation with Coach McGuire. Then you have your offer. He wanted to be at the junior day this past weekend, but he was playing 7-on-7 with Texas Tech
Flex.
Texas Flex and Texas Tech new quarterback commit that we're going to talk about, Jake Strong. And so I just think that was a big reason why he committed now versus waiting and going through an entire recruiting process. Because think about it, what's today? It's National Signing Day, and we're not talking about National Signing Day, right? Crazy. All the action takes place before today. It's the early signing period and it's transfers, and transfers don't do a signing day. So they get announced and that's that. So we've seen all those announcements, but man, I mean, this is a young man that could have waited. Everybody talks about like his profile and kind of what he had going on recruiting wise. This is also a guy that could have waited a whole nother year to sign. So I just find that pretty interesting, and just another early evaluation from Coach Blanchard. But, I know you've had a chance to talk with him before, and we've been talking about him a lot today because it's top of mind. But what do you think of Caleb Smith, Ben?
I think, like you said, it all comes down to the relationships. You mentioned his 7-on-17 Texas Flex. That's coached by Coach O and Coach Flight, 2, DFW area trainers who we've talked about before. They have several other targets, I want to say 10, 15 plus guys with a tech offer. And so, yeah, I think this is a versatile guy. You saw Coach Emmett Jones, he tweeted the Kiki QT gif. Do they like him outside, inside? I don't really know yet. I think it's going to be a bigger receiver class. You add him. They had this is the second receiver commit.
Right. Tyrone West.
TJ West.
Or
Yeah.
TJ West, right.
Yeah. TJ committed earlier in the week. So two already and several other targets out there, including guys who visited that we spoke with. And so, it looks like it's going to be a big receiver class.
Well, when you hire an offensive coordinator that throws the ball as much as Kitley does, then you're gonna load up there. Plus, they've seen attrition; they're gonna have older guys, so we'll see. But definitely more than the two that they have.
That's a good point because just thinking back to Cliff, he would always have like 15, 16 or so receivers, scholarship guys on the roster. And then you look at last year, I think Wells had like 9 or 10. So if going back to that style, you definitely need to boost the numbers.
Yeah, it's just like counting scholarships is something we usually avoid answering. Having to be the one that manages that, I don't want that job either. So I know that they'll figure it out. And again, I mentioned it being signing day. We've seen a bevy of announcements from transfers, guys that are going to walk on and be on scholarship in the fall, right? There's all sorts of things that we've seen. Okay, well, let's keep going though, because that wraps up Caleb Smith. But again, it boils down to speed, right? This is a guy that runs track. Like you said, if you really put on the tape, of course, I'm never going to say, okay, somebody's Kiki Cootie, right? But however, if Coach Jones can make that comparison, who better, right? That's the guy that coached him. So, you already mentioned TJ West out of the Houston area. This is already go from an unranked guy to a 5.73 star, top 100 kid in the state. You talked to TJ. So what could you tell us a little bit more about him?
Yeah, a little bigger, 6'2", 185. He was a guy who was very excited to play in a Zach Hitley offense. He told me that he went up there for junior day. They told him, this is a pass first offense. And he said that's all he needed to hear. And so, again, this, just like with Caleb Smith, Tech was his first and only offer to date. He committed. The Rivals, analysts clearly agree that he's talented, not only a 5'7", he's in the Texas top 100, and so I just think that this is he has really good speed. If you look at his tape, he doesn't have a lot of highlights. He told me he had a freshman quarterback.
That's right.
And so it's one of those things where, maybe he's super talented, but he's on the outside. It's tough to get him the ball, but you watch him, they do throw, several, just go routes every game. If he's 1-on-1, just throw it up and see what happens. He gets a lot of his production that way. So this could be a guy that, it takes the top off on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I quite frankly, with 5 commits in this short of a timeline, I read the story. So that's why I remember the quarterback nugget there. I really haven't dug into TJ's tape. All I know is I think the reason that you see kids evaluated that earlier is because they are playing in those bigger districts. They are playing against some bigger competition. And, somebody along the way saw him and he certainly got the ranking. But, as we'll talk about, a lot of these new guys aren't even evaluated yet. And that's fine. It's really early right now. What I have seen and what you and I have heard so far on the requests we've made is they're all coming back as, either pretty high or 3-star guys. So again, I think you look at what Coach Blanchard and what Coach McGuire were able to do while they're at Baylor. That's, I mentioned Coach McGuire obviously because he's a head coach, but that's really how Blanchard made his name, right? It wasn't, oh gosh, this is the guy that used to tweet about recruits. Now he works at Baylor. That was a headline, right? Went away, but he made his name by, getting in early on these guys and having good evaluations, so much so that took him to the NFL and he wanted to come back to college. So Yeah, I think people, it's hard, right? Even for myself, you got to put your trust into what they're doing out there. And of course, you and I have become armchair evaluators, here on Huddle. But these guys know what they're doing. With that being said, a guy I have watched tape on is Chapman Lewis out of Burleson Centennial. Another guy with great size, 6'2", 175 is listed on his profile. He is listed as an athlete, but he's going to come in and play safety. That's what the coaches talked to him about. And I think if you watch his tape, the size is pretty clear. And when you're talking safeties, you want guys that can get down in the mix, but also guys that can turn their hips, and get back in coverage. And I just think with him, you see the decisiveness when he puts his foot in the ground and he goes after somebody. He's taking good angles and he's making tackles. Interestingly enough, I posted when I posted the story, one of his latest highlights is a playoff game against Texas Tech quarterback commit Jake Strong. And, he's all over the field, 15 tackles. So I don't know what you thought about Chapman.
Yeah, I think Coach Perry went up there a few times in December when it was still the open contact period. And then he obviously came up for junior day. I think, Coach Perry's a longtime Arlington guy, Burleson, Chapman Lewis plays. So a lot of relationships there, as we keep talking about this staff. But yeah, again, a projectable athlete, safety. Could he outgrow that and potentially, put on weight and play linebacker? Looking at a Baylor defense like a Jalen Petrie, kind of played that nickel safety type. I think he could grow into that too. So I like the addition. You can never, have enough guys that like to tackle and hit, especially at Texas Tech.
We should start drinking every time we say Baylor, and we'll make the podcast a lot more fun. No. So last one before we get to the QB commit is, I guess it's debated whether it's West Texas or not, but Wichita Falls rider running back Anquan Willis. You and I got a chance to meet him and watch him play because Tech was recruiting the two kids out of the 2021 class in Banks and Castles, right? Yeah. So then, when we talk about it all the time on this podcast, like what we do from a recruiting analyst standpoint, it's not that hard, right? You go to the practice and Devin Campbell's there. You go, hey, wow, that kid's gigantic and he's really good. It's not that hard to be at a high school and see that. And so my point there is when we were watching that scrimmage and then another game, Willis always stood out. And then Castles and Banks would say, yeah, he's an underclassman. He's not even a senior. So I think he's only grown and took on even more of a role on that offense. And he's another guy that's interesting too. You just talk about fit. Running back all the way, right? But already listed at 6'1", 220. We watched him play middle linebacker too. So just an all-around football player. And, I think this is a cool one because that's the one that went viral when he was filmed getting his offer from the coaches.
Yeah, he's a big guy. You said running back all the way. He actually told me he was offered as a linebacker, but, the coaches could let him play both ways. He said he prefers to play running back. And so, I just kind of think, hey, this guy's a football player. We'll take him and figure out the rest later. But yeah, I like him. You watch his highlights, big, powerful guy running the ball. And then defensively, he, coming off the edge and getting after the quarterback seems to be do that pretty well too. So you mentioned Duda Banks, Shed Castles. You just got Jacob Rodriguez.
That's right.
As a transfer. And so, Ryder to Tech, getting the numbers up there.
Yeah, that's always good to see, right? Because, and it's not just with Ryder, it's when those kids come home. It's, when the people are wearing the Texas Tech gear, all that other good stuff. Sorry, all the kids are home, snowstorm again. But it's all of those things. And, we're even seeing that because there's another high school in Wichita Falls that's pumping out some talent too. And maybe we'll get to that on the junior day side, but it's all good to see. So again, I'm a fan of Willis. I'm interested to see how that fits. Maybe I said running back all the way. But again, follow that up by saying he's a hell of a middle linebacker too. They were absolutely crushing the team they were playing in the run game, and he was a big part of that. Okay, so I've alluded to it a couple times, but Northwest quarterback Jake Strong makes it official. We had talked about it, up until the weekend that he visited. You and I certainly knew a commitment was possible, but I wasn't expecting it all to go down as quickly as it did. But it does make sense when you look at it in hindsight. This is a young man that, started to get more and more offers. But one of his first offers, if not his first offer, was from Western Kentucky. And at the time, that was Zach Kitley. And so I think once everybody got together, once they went through the board, once they built that relationship, I think from there it was just a fit. And, I think what you're seeing from Jake is really what you want in a quarterback commitment. And, stating the obvious, there wasn't a quarterback commitment last year. So you really didn't pay attention to these kind of things. But he's 100%, on board, committed. He wants to recruit others. He knows these guys. You alluded to it earlier when we talked about Caleb Smith. His team, Texas Flex, I mean, it is absolutely loaded from top to bottom, not only with 2023 guys, but even underclassmen. And so I think you'll see, other visits as a result of that. But also, I think, to me, some people have their own opinion about 7-on-7. To me, that's the upside of 7-on-7. If you just stayed at Northwest, and I like Northwest, right? But there's not D1 receivers there, in my opinion. There's not D1 offensive linemen, right? Yeah. And so to see him kind of rise, from that, and then, combine that with the fact that in the offseason he can go and train and throw them around with those guys and have them believe in him so much as a passer that they'll commit to go and play college with him. That was a tangent. I think that says a lot about what he brings to the table, in terms of being a thrower, and just being a playmaker at the position.
Yeah. And I went to go see him actually the next day. They were going to stay for a couple of days at Tech after the visit, but the second day, on that Sunday, they had a 7-on-7 tournament over here in Plano, right across the street from my house. And so I went to go check him out, and, you really like what you see as far as just, he has, surprisingly good athleticism that you wouldn't expect that. And then, his arm is really good too. He was, his deep ball, fitting the ball into tight windows, and then just, just generally being, it looks like his teammates gravitate towards him as far as like a leadership type role too. And so, yeah, you said we've already seen him out recruiting on social media. Caleb Smith, his teammate, and so, and several other guys, like you said. So always a huge deal to get a quarterback, especially when you don't get one the year before. And so, it's huge. And so, Strong is kind of the next man up. You have a couple of young guys on the roster, but there's a gap. And so then Strong comes in next year. And so, that's kind of, his role now. You're muted.
Sorry, guys. There's kids screaming in the background, so I was trying to give Ben silence. Maybe I lost my train of thought there too. Sorry. I think, when you get a quarterback in the class, last year, maybe you needed one, maybe you didn't, right? But because of the timing of how everything happened, they weren't going to take one, or yada, yada, yada. But it just adds a different dynamic to the class unless you have someone else at another position that is doing that. I guess a easier way to say that is there really wasn't that guy necessarily in last year's class, at this point, or really even until like after the fall. And so, I just think that creates momentum. It's only February 2nd, and you have 10 commitments now. So clearly the coaches are doing something right. But if you really look at the class top to bottom, when you have a quarterback that is not only is in the DFW area, but has had success and is climbing and quite frankly, putting up a bunch of numbers. Yeah. And he can play on one of the better teams in DFW and be their quarterback. I mean, last year their quarterback was Nick Evers, and he's a 4-star signed to Oklahoma. So, and he wasn't a 4-star signed to anyone, whenever we first met him. Right. Yeah. So I just think there's a lot of potential there, because he's got guys all over the field. And just because you've got really good receivers does not mean you can put the ball where it needs to be. We've watched so much football at that level on the 7-on-7 and even just here locally, that's what I was trying to say earlier. That gives me a lot of confidence that he can continue to develop and, and be a guy at this level. And so that combined with Kitley's offense, it just gives you a lot to be excited about in terms of the future.
Yep. And you can see why Strong would want to commit to Texas Tech. Like you mentioned, he was getting other offers too. He got Cincinnati, Indiana, but Zach Hilly, the relationship, his offense. I mean, it's a really good spot, I think, for both parties there.
And that's the best when it happens to where it's a fit for both. I mean, because we've talked a lot about him as a player, but Northwest is basically north of Fort Worth. There's a lot of tech territory around here, former students, alumni, et cetera, right? And his sister went to Texas Tech. So I just think a lot of that came together for him. And, that's a cool story, right? Quarterback's interesting because you've got the transfer portal, you've got the perceived cream of the crop at this point, when in reality, what is that? What does it look like? And with more and more programs here in Texas going regional for talent, and then them all kind of fighting for this, Arch Manning race and stuff like that, I thought it was important that you get a guy early and set that tone, because clearly they were making offers, clearly they were doing things. And another thing is that this is the only guy they're going to take. We talk about taking a quarterback, not taking a quarterback. His father has joined the board and flat out had said it's one quarterback, right? I didn't personally ask that, in an interview. But straight, that's what level 0.5. I don't know. So anyway, I know we should probably wrap it up on Jake, because we still got to get to junior day. We still got to talk about basketball, but again, tremendous momentum. We've got interviews with all of those guys except for Willis. That one's coming soon. We make all of those free. Podcast is free. We want you to join us at Red Raider Sports. You'll get a lot more of these details as they happen, including, mentioned signing day with a ton of transfer news, a ton of walk-on news. Ben's all over that stuff. And we've got updates from been over 22 kids that attended junior day. I thought some of the statistics that I looked at from the list, sorry, I had an echo there, were that of the 70 plus visitors, 64 of them held an offer from Texas Tech. And I would say it was 80-20 in terms of 80% to 20% in terms of 2023 prospects to 2024 prospects. So recruiting is a numbers game. I'll say that till I'm red in the face. And you had serious talent on campus as well. 15 to 17 four-star prospects. And I want to say at least 6 or 7 of those were in the Rivals 250. So it was just all around a good turnout. And the feedback that we've received so far has all been pretty positive. I guess, whether we start with this or not, I want to talk about the organization and what they did, maybe versus what we've heard before. Does that sound like a good idea?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to hand it over to you. What we talked about, guys, is we can't go down the whole list on a podcast. That would be boring. That would be like an audio book. Ben, I want you to pick a couple of the interviews, maybe offense, defense, talk through that. Feel free to mention any other guy, and I'll do the same.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. I mean, Dylan Shaw, I think he's an offensive lineman from Corpus Christi, made the long drive up. I think he's one of their top targets, frankly, the way, he said he was around Daniel Sill, who was one of the commitments a lot. Coach Stephen Hamby really made him a priority. And Shaw had a lot of good things to say about that and his interest in tech. One thing that he did also mention is he has offers from Tech and UTSA. He does want to, try to see what else is out there, which is fair. He said he wants to go camp at, some of these programs this summer. And then, he mentioned he'll definitely be back for a visit. And so, a lot to like there. 6'4", 290, probably a guard prospect. And, Tech's always trying to beef up the offensive line, which leads me to another guy I wanted to mention, Isaiah Robinson, who, a lot more highly rated, but, still on that list of really, top wants, and he's a Rivals 250 guy, Arlington Lamar. And so a ton of relationships there. Coach Perry he was at Lamar. I believe he also went there in high school. And then Coach McGuire is really good, really close with the coaching staff over there, and Tech just signed the quarterback as a preferred walk-on. But the note with him is he told me out of all the schools that are recruiting him, and he has 23 offers and counting, he said Tech's recruiting him the hardest. So, that just kind of, perks your ear up a little bit. And this was his third visit to Tech. He visited in June, with Wells. He visited in November after McGuire got hired, and then now. So clearly there's interest from him too. And he would be one of the, top O-line commits, in recent history if he came.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, so Ben just rattled off, I think, 3 or 4, guys with a ton of tidbits. Just a reminder, right? If you want all this stuff as it happens and like really in depth, on who these guys are and why it's important that they're on the Tech campus and all that good stuff, redditorsports.com. Make sure you check us out. If you already know, make sure your friends, your family, if they bleed red and black, let them know. There's not a site out there that does what we do from a recruiting standpoint, period. So again, good notes, Ben. So the guy I wanted to start with in terms because I knew where you were going in terms of like guys that maybe you felt were really impressed or like were really close to the staff. I know I think it's Tripp Reardon. I interviewed him. He's a tight end out of Frisco, Wakeland. And, I don't know that he's going to commit, anytime soon or later in the process. Right. But I interviewed like at least a dozen or so kids that day and more in the following days. And, he was very enthusiastic about it, gave me a ton of detail. And, you could tell, like he mentioned just how he was saying things like it was hard to describe the feeling and, talking about the energy from the coaches. And so I just think that, without being there and having somebody tell you about it, he really painted a picture, in contrast to that, we get kids that are like, can we just text? Or, yeah, it was fun, and so to me, it's usually pretty telltale about somebody that really enjoyed themselves on the visit. Yeah. But I mean, when we think tight end, last thing, when we think tight end around here, we're pretty used to like 6'8", 6'9" guys. It's a reminder he's 6'4", 240. But again, a young man that's going to continue growing and just a big kid, I mean, the Baylor drinking game joke, applies here, but those are kind of kids they would get in and they would grow them up. And then they would, not only would they help once in a while in the passing game, but, they were also bullies in the run game too. So, there's a lot of different ways to look at what he could bring to the table.
Yeah. And I actually met him last week. He was at the basketball game I went to go see Drew Steffi. Really good relationship with, the tight ends coach, Josh Cochran. And I agree. I don't think he's in any rush. Mentioned, Vanderbilt and a few other recent offers. He's been picking up a lot of new offers lately, but, the coaches didn't take a tight end this year. And so, Travis Kuntz is leaving. And so, you have Mason Tharp, you have Jed Castles, and then, you try to add one in this class, potentially with a guy like Reardon. Was there, well, one guy we didn't mention who I think maybe deserves a mention is Coy Eakin, who committed also. We kind of glossed over that. We did
absolutely skip Coy Eakin. Yeah, no, I've got a lot of noise.
Led the country in receiving yards.
Yeah, I'll let you paint that picture. I'm going back on mute. My kids are screaming at each other.
Yeah, so I mean, I know you spoke to him a couple times. I exchanged some messages with him, but Stephenville, he chose Tech over TCU, which is pretty notable because TCU wanted him to come play linebacker, and Tech, he's going to be a receiver here. 6'3", 190. You, like I said, led the country in receiving yards. I think over 2,000 yards, or like right around 2,000 yards. Had a crazy state championship game where he had like 190 receiving yards, scored, punched an interception out, which his team picked up and ran back for another. Like, this guy's just a playmaker. And from just what I got from him is he loves Texas Tech. Maybe been a Tech fan his whole life. I don't know that, but he was just so excited to get the offer. and, visited and committed the same day. So, you always like having those guys. It just feels like he's going to play his heart out anytime he gets on the field. And so he'll make everyone else around him better, is what I think.
Yeah, I mean that the main takeaway, you said it all, but the main takeaway is if you haven't, just go watch that highlight tape from the state game. I mean, there are literally millions of kids that play football in the state of Texas. So this whole recruiting rivals thing, it's not going to catch them all. You just can't. And I think that was a kid that came on late. You look at him, or maybe you see him at Texas Roadhouse or the grocery store. You don't think, hey man, that guy's got to be a football player. But put on the tape and he's just making big boy plays out there. I mean, I'm sure that some of those corners that are guarding him run these fast 40 times, but that doesn't always matter when it comes to game speed and what you're able to do. So I was pretty impressed. And the coolest part is you got to remember these guys are going to get into a college program, college diet, college weight room. They're going to look completely different when they're out there playing for the Red Raiders.
Yeah. So I just found his season stats: 93 catches, 31 touchdowns, 2140 receiving yards, 2662 total yards, and he was the MVP of the state title game. So you can't get any more productive than that. And, a guy we didn't mention, Gavin Freeman is off to Oklahoma. Maybe Eakin, took his spot, different type of player, but maybe that opened up the spot there.
Yeah, I just don't know if it was a fit or a relationship thing. But ultimately the coaches went to Gavin, and instead of a full scholarship, they were going to try to work in some sort of a blue or a gray shirt. And that's eventually what he accepted from Oklahoma. So, when it made it all things equal, his dad played at OU. So it's really no love lost, great kid, still very talented. And, we could, be facing him here in another year or two. But again, Coy is I think completely different. I think you put somebody like that on the outside, he continues to grow. You move him around your offense. I'm very confident that Kitley can figure out ways to get guys like that to football. But anyway, I know we pivoted there, and I've been on mute. The only other thing I was going to say, just as a reminder, I mean, me and Ben are trying to go through this junior day list, and there are a ton of guys. There's so many that I could mention. But the sheer fact that there are multiple defensive ends on here, is pretty impressive. I would say another guy that really has a good relationship with the coaches and gravitated towards, in terms of their comments and their feedback, over the weekend was Samaj Burrell out of North Crowley. I think he just has a really good relationship with Blanchard and McGuire. And now that he's met the entire staff, I think that's going to continue. Because when Coach McGuire came on, he mentioned that all my guys are going to be recruiters and everyone's going to recruit everyone. So I think the interesting part, I was texting you about this earlier, Ben, is that when you talk to these kids, they always mention McGuire and Blanchard, right? Because, I mean, I think these guys just have a cadence or a good way of working together. But then, now that they've met some of these other guys, now they're going to start, recruiting together. So I think if we're having this conversation again in 2 or 3 months, we'll really start to dig in and understand, Coach Cochran's, Coach Fitch, and all these guys that we got to know a little bit about towards the end of that 2022 class. Now we're going to kind of learn a little bit more about, how they do over a full cycle.
Yeah, Samaje, he tells us, McGuire says, he's the best linebacker in the country, 3-star kid, but Ohio State and Oklahoma have offered. So, kind of tells you that maybe the recruiting sides have him a little underrated. If Ohio State wants you, you're probably pretty good. And so, we just talked about a lot of guys. Now we're in a dead period the whole month of February. And then, come March comes the quiet period. And so, I expect more junior days and obviously with spring practices starting then, and then, you really get going.
Well, I expect 5 commitments a month. I don't know about you. So
that's tough. It's asking a lot.
No, we'll see though. I mean, it's been 5 in the past week and a half, but 10, it's a long recruiting cycle, but 10 total commits, still number 5 in the nation. And what I will say is when you give yourself these numbers and you get these 4 stars on campus, they're going to get all those other offers, right? But I think even if you could land a few of them, you start trending towards holding on to one of those top spots. Because even 2022, I find it pretty interesting. The day's not over by, at all. But I do think Tech is going to squeak into the top 40 and hold on to that. Right now, last checked, I refreshed it was like 37 or 38. And that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, I think Tech actually might fall out of that. That's just because the two guys, Eric Gray and Coy Eakin, they're blue shirt, gray shirt type deals, and the guys at Rivals, I messaged with them earlier. You have to flip the card to signed. Well, if they're not going to sign the NLI, then you don't do that. And then the rankings only account for the signed guys after a while. So, we'll see. But that's semantics.
Way to bring down the mood, Ben.
No,
Golly, so many people just turn this video off. I'm just kidding.
yeah,
No,
no,
the point to me, yeah, maybe
it's
that's
a top 37. Right.
maybe that's
I'm
the
with
fine
you.
print, right? But I'm just saying it's still in the top four. That's where you want to be, and if you're able to do that from the first week of November to now, then
I agree with you.
All right.
The talent is still coming in, but I'm just trying to explain why when you refresh the page next week and you see text dropped, that's going to be what they only count the guys who we put as signed, and so that's the deal.
All right, guys, Ben's fault. Well, all right, on the junior day, only a couple more guys I wanted to mention. Cedar Hill, obviously with McGuire's background, Kylan Salter, outside linebacker, was in. I thought he had great feedback for you.
Yes.
And then I thought, one guy I wanted to mention, Trey Wilson. Sometimes before you meet a young man, you really know nothing about them. All I know about him is he's getting new offers like every day and from everyone. I haven't really looked at the tape or anything like that. I just know he's a top 250 guy and a defensive end out of Garland. I mean, he had, not only was he just like an impressive young man, but he had a lot of details to share. And it sounds like he's really close, not only with Blanchard, but James Lockhart is a former, I covered him when he signed with A&M. I'm an old ass. But then he transferred from A&M to Baylor. And then when he finished his playing career, he's a GA, and that's what he's doing here at Texas Tech with Coach McGuire. So, I mean, just mention his name a lot. So I just found that interesting. And, what a perspective, right? From a kid that was also a highly ranked, highly recruited guy, having somebody, like that on your staff to recruit, someone that played at A&M, played at Baylor. I just think that's pretty special.
Yep. I'm interested in seeing out of all these guys, and there's so many of them, who comes back for a spring practice, because that'll kind of tell you who is, serious about Tech. So, do you have anything else for football, or you want to talk a little basketball?
No, I was going to say we should probably wrap it up with some basketball, because if we've talked about this many kids, I'm probably sure we're pushing 40, 50 minutes here.
Yeah. I mean, so a pretty good Saturday, Tuesday there. I like you said at the beginning, I flew down on Saturday for the Mississippi State game. Unreal atmosphere, probably nothing like the last night, but you just kind of forget, because I haven't been back in what, 3 years or something like that for a home game. So you just kind of forget, what all that entails. And Tech played really well against Mississippi State, completely shut them down, but no one wants to hear about that. Everyone wants to talk about Texas. And that was just, a pretty comfortable win from Texas. Never really threatened Tech, in my opinion. Tech kind of led throughout. Kevin McCullough had a fantastic game, kept getting to the free throw line. And then, the two big men, Bryson Williams, Kevin O'Banner, were just excellent. And I didn't think that Texas had an answer for any of those three guys. And so I just want to commend, if any students are listening to this, great job. That was, I just watched it on TV here from my home in, Plano, and it was insane to see, and then hear the announcers talk about, yeah, we've been to Duke, we've been to Kansas. This is the best atmosphere we've ever seen. It's still unreal to hear that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's really sunk in, right? Because in the moment, I watched the game, and I was like watching on the couch like you at home, and I looked up just from like scrolling afterwards, watching Sports Center, doing all that, and it was like 11 o'clock already. And for me, that's past my bedtime, Ben. And so, but after staring at your phone for like an hour and watching the game for however many hours, like I was just like, whoa. But then when you said it, it kind of rushed back because, man, I just got up, went to work, stayed busy all day. I really didn't kind of relish in it. But, look, when my first year at Texas Tech, lived in Weymouth, and it was right there, the United Sports Center, all that supermarket center, that it was all brand new, and Bob Knight was the coach. So, I saw it even back then where kids would line up all the way to Weymouth just to get into a game. Now, there weren't tents and stuff like that, don't get me wrong, but I just want to say, like, a lot of people worry about what people outside of Texas Tech have to say about Texas Tech or this side or the other. I only tell that story because that passion, that fan base, all that's been around for years, right? It was around before a national championship game and whatever else, right? Because Bob Knight has his own, plaques on the wall or trophies or reputation. So even then it was kind of wild, but just to see what it's become, just to see what they've been able to do. And just this season so far has been so fun to watch. I can't imagine, pardon me, how much fun that was. Ric Flair was there, right? Joey McGuire screaming at the crowd. And you could tell even on TV, just the energy in the building. I would say when they cut it to a 5-point lead in the second half, I was kind of like, geez, I expected a run, but like, let's go. And then Obanor just nails 2 threes in a row and just buries them. And I was my son's 8, and I was trying to teach him, I'm like, look, momentum's very real. Like, that probably was like a gut punch to those guys because they're having a claw and scratch for points. And this guy is getting like shooter's bounces on these threes. It was cracking me up, man. And I'm telling you, if he would have, that move he made on the baseline and then the step back 3, if he would have made that one, that would have been all over the internet. And that, of all the shots that didn't go, it was that one. I mean, he smoked that guy. That would have been pretty cool. But all around solid. I mean, the social media with the slight trolls and jabs, the millionaire donors with the jabs on social media, all of it, right? And I think, anyway, the last thing I'll say, Ben, I don't want to open a can of worms, but we went to Tech, so we know what the back of the United Spirit Arena looks like, right? It's the gigantic, like nobody ever walked there. You never, like, nobody had a reason to be down there because you either walked around or that's where you parked or a bus dropped you off. But literally, it's usually just blocked off, and it is a huge, like, from where those students were at the rails to the bottom, and maybe I'm misremembering, but it's at least 10, 15, 20 feet, right? I mean, it's huge. And so that perception on Twitter, when Goodman's posting now, again, you're flipping people off and you're saying, FUT, obviously, maybe not your most shining moment. They're not going to put that on their LinkedIn page when they graduate, but it's college sports, it's passion, right? And all these people are like, oh, heavens, look at this behavior. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Do they understand that these kids are like so far away? Like, there's no harm. Like, they shouldn't feel threatened. Like, they're in a bus. Like, anyway, I just thought that part of it was a little odd, right? And the fact that it was like, yeah, these are all students, of course they're going to chant something like this. I think you just mentioned Plano. I bet you go to high school basketball in Plano and they're talking, in the stands at a basketball game, So anyway, I thought that was a little bit overboard in terms of like, oh my gosh. And, what about the safety? What's going to happen? And I'm like, come on, dude. Like, they try to paint a picture of something, and they can, right? Because a lot of these guys are national guys, or it's a narrative that gets out there. And I just want to say kudos again to the fans, because after all that and what's going to happen, I mean, all they did was make it difficult on the opponent. No, there was no incidents. Nothing happened. I mean, if anything, it was just tremendous. I mean, some of the pictures coming out today are just amazing.
Yeah, it was about the best result possible between the way the game went, the crowd, and just kind of the reputation, that you came out with all the national guys. all the haters, all the Goodmans who said you're one of the worst jobs in the Big 12. You think does he still think that? I mean, it can't be. You mentioned the bus incident, and Brock Cunningham is going out there, with the hook 'em, and their official accounts has embraced the hate, and then he goes and fouls out and scores 3 points. Like, I just thought that was funny.
Is he
Um,
like was he, I don't follow recruiting. Is he like a highly ranked guy or something
no,
like that?
he wasn't, but
Oh, okay. Well, I
you
don't know.
know, it's still funny. Like, you're gonna hype this kid up and then he fouls out, But no,
Yeah,
again,
there were a lot of nuggets like that. I mean, I
yeah,
think Norrance shotgun a beer,
yeah,
that was awesome. I
yeah,
I didn't put it out there just because I thought, maybe it would get a stink eye, but our photographer did a great job of, capturing outside and then, tag the watermark of Red River Sports. Well, I was like, oh, that's cool. You hit it right there. And I zoomed in and it's a kid hitting his vape pen.
that's right.
So definitely screenshot that. I
No,
mean, it just looked like a lot of fun. What I would
no,
say though, to kind of round it out, everybody knows, what happened last night, but you guys have been covering some five-star guys lately. So you're 16-5. Mark Adams is kind of, he's walking tall right now. You just beat the guy that left you at the altar, so to say. I mean, this has got to be creating some momentum on the recruiting trail, with these impact players that we're talking about.
yeah, I mentioned Drew Steffi. Tech just got him here from Frisco Memorial. Really good shooter, and his dad is a former college coach and has a lot of good relationships with other top guys. One guy that did lose out on, we don't have to talk about a lot. Johan Treyor committed to LSU. Kind of a surprise. Kind of shocked everyone because I think the field was Memphis, Kansas, Michigan, and then he goes to LSU, out of nowhere. But yeah, again, Tech also had Elijah Fisher on campus. He's the other 5-star. And then a guy like Robert Jennings, who is already signed. He was at the game last night and had really good things to say. And so, like you said, it's all recruiting momentum, and Tech appears to be pretty good at basketball. So I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the coolest part. And you take a look at what they've done with that. Is it the Womble Center?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it's called? I mean, it's amazing. And the biggest upside, not only winning the game is the objective, but the biggest upside about having some of those national guys then is they're sharing pictures and talking about how great this place is. I mean, all these guys, whether you get them or not, they follow those guys too. Those guys are going to go talk about it on their podcast. I just think it's tremendous. And I think, it's too early to tell, but I think Joey McGuire is going to have a similar effect because the same guys that donated millions to make that happen for the basketball program, they're doing it for football. And it's going to take some time, but, can you imagine having that plus a successful, Coach McGuire with all that momentum? I mean, that's where the possibilities, you get into that and you say, hey, why not some of these national guys come play defensive end at Texas Tech, right? So, they're going to have to fight. And a lot of these guys that they have, out of those 5 guys, Ben, that we talked about with the football program, just to round out the podcast, out of those 5, 4 are currently unrated. We talked about West with the 5.73 star. But I mean, the early feedback is at least half of them are going to be high 3 stars. Then now we get these other new guys. I think it's kind of refreshing almost to like be able to like really dig in and kind of figure out maybe where these guys are in the pecking order, and be able to say, hey guys, we'd like to see an evaluation on this. But we're not the only recruiting company in the game too. So you see kind of what other people have ranked and where we're at. And it's February 2nd. And, not a lot of kids are rated. I don't know if that's related to COVID or the ability to get out and go to camps or this, that, and the other. But we've got Rivals Camp coming up. There's 7-on-7. So whenever the snowstorms end and all that, I think we may see, even more kids start to maybe build their stock. And then you start to see some of these spots, Tech's got 10 commits. I think Baylor's got I don't know, 10, 11, and then that's going to keep going throughout the state. And so I just don't see this thing slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm with you. You mentioned Baylor. It feels like Tech and Baylor just going back and forth. You get a commit, now you get a commit. It's just,
I mean,
see who fills up first.
You took their recruiting guy and you
Right.
took one of their lead recruiters. I mean, that's what you wanted, and we talk about how important that is. So yeah, maybe another pod for another time, but yeah, I mean, this is the fun part, Ben. This is what we talked about late last year. You've got Dykes at TCU and his soldiers on the recruiting side. You've got McGuire Blanchard, his new staff. You've got Baylor, and then we haven't even talked about like UT or A&M or OU, Oklahoma State, right? And then all of the other programs that recruit Texas. I mean, it is still early. So it's exciting to see them build that momentum and get the class, built pretty quickly. I mean, think about it like this, Ben. I mean, 10 commitments. When he took the job, they didn't have 10 2022 commitments. So it can be done, right? And there's a lot of different schools of thought there. I just think it's roster management, evaluation, and kind of doing it the way that they know how to do it. And that's what Coach McGuire often refers to, as the brand, or, this whole plan that he has for the program. So anyway, a lot of different stuff today. Number one reminder is contact Carnley Properties for all of your Austin area real estate needs. We're going to add their info below the player. We're also going to add maybe some of the info about the new commits, some of those story links, but RedRaidersports.com. Follow Ben and I for all of Texas Tech related recruiting news. And, you got to get on the site. There's much more than Texas Tech recruiting that goes on. We have a huge staff. And these guys cover the basketball team back and forth. We're going to get into baseball. And then, of course, football off-season, spring game, all of that's been announced. There's no place better.
That's
Ben,
right.
anything else?
Horns down. It's my last thing.
Oh, man, that's a federal crime. All right, man.
15-yard penalty.
Exactly. You're out of here. All right. Appreciate it, Ben. For Ben Golan, I'm Matt Clare. This is the Lubbock or Leave It podcast. You guys have a good one.